The night Julian Cross asked his grandfather to choose his wife, nobody in that boardroom expected the old man to choose the woman who mopped the floors after everyone else went home. If you've ever wondered what real love looks like when $100 million is standing right next to it, stay with me, because this story earns every single minute of it. Before we go further, if stories like this move you, tap that like button and subscribe, because what happens next will stay with you long after the video ends. Julian Cross was 34 years old and worth more money than most countries. He owned Cross Dynamics, a technology empire that stretched across 4 continents. And yet on the night his doctor told him his heart was failing faster than anyone expected, all that money felt like paper in his hands. He sat across from his grandfather, Augustus Cross, a man of 86 who still wore a suit every single day out of habit, and he said the words that would change everything. "Grandfather, I don't have time to fall in love the normal way anymore. I want you to choose my wife." Augustus set down his coffee cup slowly and looked at his grandson for a long time before he answered. "Julian, you're asking an old man to hand you the most important gift of his life, and I intend to take it seriously." Word spread through the Cross family circle within days. 3 women, each connected to old money and old ambition, arrived at Cross Tower ready to compete for a seat beside Julian Cross. There was Priscilla Vane, the daughter of a shipping magnate, who walked through the lobby like she already owned it. There was Bianca Reyes, a socialite who had been photographed on more magazine covers than most actresses. And there was Delphine Okafor, whose family ran a chain of luxury hotels and who spoke about love the way other people spoke about stock portfolios. Each of them believed they had already won before. The contest even began, and each of them had no idea that the person who would truly capture Augustus Cross's attention was already inside that building, pushing a cleaning cart down the 22nd floor hallway every single night. Her name was Mara Lindqvist. She was 28 years old, and she had been cleaning offices at Cross Tower for almost 2 years, arriving after 6 in the evening when the executives went home and leaving before the sun came up. She never spoke unless spoken to. She never lingered near closed doors. She simply did her work with a quiet dignity that most people in that building never noticed, because most people never looked twice at someone holding a mop. But Augustus Cross noticed everything. He had built an empire out of noticing the details other men missed, and something about the way Mara treated the night security guard, the way she left a cup of tea on the desk of an intern who was working too late, the way she never once complained even when Priscilla Vane once told her to move out of the way like she was invisible furniture, told him everything he needed to know before he had even learned her name. Augustus called a meeting in the grand dining room of the Cross estate 1 week later. Julian, dressed in a tailored charcoal suit, sat at the head of the table while the 3 women took their seats, each one glowing with confidence. If you were sitting in that room, watching 3 women compete for a man's heart while an old man quietly studied every gesture they made, what would you be thinking right now? Let us know in the comments, because what happened next split that family right down the middle. Augustus stood at the head of the table and folded his hands behind his back the way he always did before delivering news that mattered. "I am not choosing a wife for my grandson based on beauty or family name," he said. "I am choosing a woman who understands that character is worth more than every dollar this family has ever earned. Each of you will be given 1 week inside this house, and I will be watching." Priscilla scoffed under her breath, but recovered quickly, flashing a bright smile toward Julian. Bianca leaned back in her chair, utterly certain that no test on earth could shake her composure. Delphine simply nodded, treating the entire ordeal like a business negotiation she intended to close. None of them noticed the quiet housekeeper standing near the kitchen doorway, the same woman who had been cleaning Cross Tower every night, the same woman who now happened to be assigned to serve breakfast in the family dining room during the week the contest would unfold. Mara had no idea she was about to become the center of a story none of them had written. The first morning arrived, and Augustus gave his instructions plainly. Each woman would prepare breakfast with her own hands, no chefs, no assistants, nothing but the ingredients in the kitchen and whatever skill they carried inside them. Priscilla burned 2 pans of eggs before giving up entirely and ordering a bakery to deliver pastries through the back gate, hoping no one would notice. Bianca managed to produce something resembling toast, though she complained the entire time that cooking was beneath a woman of her position. Delphine took the challenge more seriously, producing a passable omelet, though her hands shook with irritation the whole time. And in the corner of that same kitchen, quietly, and without anyone asking her to, Mara prepared a simple breakfast of eggs, toast, and fruit, the kind of meal she used to make for her younger brother back when their mother worked 2 jobs just to keep their small apartment warm through the winter. Augustus tasted every plate that morning, and when he reached the simple dish Mara had made without even realizing it would be judged, his eyes softened in a way none of the family had seen in years. "This meal tastes like it was made with love rather than obligation," he said quietly, and Mara, embarrassed, quickly explained that she had simply made an extra plate out of habit because she always cooked enough for 2. Julian, sitting at the far end of the table, watched this exchange with a curiosity he couldn't quite explain, though he told himself it meant nothing more than politeness toward the staff. Over the following days, Augustus designed small, quiet tests that none of the 3 contestants realized were tests at all. He asked each woman to spend an afternoon in the garden, and while Priscilla complained about dirt under her manicured nails and Bianca spent the entire time on her phone, Delphine at least made an effort, though her questions about the flowers always circled back to how much the estate's landscaping must be worth. Meanwhile, Mara, tasked with simply delivering iced tea to the terrace, stopped to gently support a wilting rosebush with a garden stake she found leaning against the wall, not because anyone asked her to, but because she couldn't stand to see something living go unattended. Augustus watched from his study window and wrote something down in the small leather notebook he always carried, the same notebook his late wife had given him decades earlier. On the 4th evening, a storm rolled across the estate with a violence nobody expected, and the power failed throughout the entire mansion. Screams echoed from the east wing, and when the staff rushed to check, they found that Julian, walking down a darkened staircase, had lost his footing and fallen hard, his leg twisted beneath him and his breathing suddenly shallow and wrong. Priscilla stood frozen, more concerned about the broken vase near the staircase than the man crumpled on the floor. Bianca screamed for someone else to handle it. Delphine, to her credit, tried to call for help, though her hands shook too badly to dial correctly. It was Mara who reached him first, kneeling beside him in the dark, pressing her palm gently against his forehead, speaking to him in a low, steady voice that somehow cut through the chaos of the storm. "Stay with me," she said. "Don't you dare close your eyes on me now." She found flashlights in the pantry within minutes, wrapped his leg with a torn bedsheet to stop the swelling, and stayed beside him on the cold marble floor until the backup generators finally kicked in and the paramedics could reach the estate through the flooded roads. Julian, still in pain but conscious, looked up at her face illuminated by flashlight and asked the only question that mattered to him in that moment. "Why did you stay when everyone else ran?" Mara answered without hesitation, "Because someone was hurting, and that was the only fact that mattered to me. If you were lying on that floor in the dark, wondering which of the 4 women in that house actually cared whether you lived or died, wouldn't you already know the answer? Stay with us, because the story is only getting started." The injury turned out to be a fractured leg rather than anything life-threatening, but the doctors were far more concerned about Julian's heart condition, warning the family that stress and physical strain could accelerate the very illness he had been quietly hiding from almost everyone in his life, including the 3 women competing for his hand. Only Augustus and his personal physician knew the full truth, that Julian's heart carried a defect that had worsened over the past year, and that the marriage he sought wasn't merely about companionship, but about finding someone strong enough to stand beside him through whatever time he had left. This was the secret Julian had never spoken aloud to any of the 3 contestants, terrified that revealing it would turn their affection into pity, or worse, into calculated patience while they waited for an inheritance. While Julian recovered in his private wing of the estate, a man named Desmond Cole arrived at the gates, introducing himself as an old associate of the family's business dealings. Desmond was Augustus's grandnephew, a cousin twice removed who had spent the last several years managing certain overseas divisions of Cross Dynamics, divisions that, as it would soon become clear, had been quietly siphoning money into accounts that belonged to no one but Desmond himself. He arrived at the estate under the pretense of checking on Julian's health, but his real purpose was to secure signatures on a series of documents that would transfer emergency operational control of the company into his own hands while Julian was too weak to notice what he was truly signing. Desmond found Mara alone in the hallway outside Julian's room one evening, and he wasted no time making his intentions clear. "You clean floors for a living," he said, his voice smooth and condescending. "But I'm offering you an opportunity to clean up quite nicely. All I need is for you to encourage Julian to sign a few documents without asking too many questions, and I'll make sure you never have to hold a mop again in your life." Mara looked at him steadily, refusing to flinch under the weight of his offer. "I don't sell the people who've shown me kindness," she said. "Not for any amount of money you could offer." Desmond's smile faded into something colder. "Everyone has a price, Miss Lindqvist. You just haven't found yours yet." Mara held his gaze without blinking. "Then I suppose you'll be waiting a very long time." What Desmond didn't know was that Mara had overheard fragments of his phone calls in the days prior, quiet mentions of transferred accounts, and board members who needed to be paid to look away. She said nothing to anyone at first, unsure whether her word would even be believed against a man who wore a $5,000 suit and shared the family name. But that night, unable to sleep, she made a decision that would either save the Cross family or destroy the fragile trust she had built with every one of them. She wrote down everything she remembered, every phone number she had glimpsed on his phone screen when he wasn't careful, every name he had mentioned in hushed conversations near the garden wall, and she placed the folded paper inside her apron pocket, waiting for the right moment to hand it to someone who could actually do something about it. The week of testing came to its final morning, and Augustus gathered everyone in the grand dining room once more, his cane tapping against the marble floor with each measured step. "I have made my decision," he announced, and the tension in the room thickened instantly. Priscilla straightened her posture, certain that her family name alone would carry the day. Bianca flipped her hair back and smiled toward Julian, who sat in a wheelchair with his legs still elevated. Delphine folded her hands calmly, prepared for whatever outcome came her way. "But before I announce anything," Augustus continued, "I want to ask each of you one final question, and I want an honest answer, because your answer will tell me more than this entire week ever could. If Julian lost every dollar he owns tomorrow, every company, every property, every advantage his name provides, would you still choose to marry him?" Priscilla answered first, her voice careful and diplomatic. "Marriage requires stability, Mr. Cross. I don't think it would be responsible of me to promise anything without knowing what our future would actually look like." Bianca shrugged lightly. "I've worked hard to build the life I have, and I don't think it's fair to ask me to give up comfort for uncertainty." Delphine, to her credit, hesitated before answering honestly. "I care about Julian," she said, "but I won't pretend that his position in this world isn't part of why I'm here." Augustus nodded slowly, unsurprised, before turning toward the doorway where Mara stood holding a serving tray, uncertain why she had suddenly become part of the conversation. "Mara," he said gently, "I'm asking you the same question, and I want you to answer honestly, because I have watched you carefully these past 2 weeks, and I believe your answer will matter more than you realize." Mara set the tray down slowly and took a breath before speaking. "If Julian lost everything tomorrow," she said, her voice steady despite the weight of every eye in the room, "I would still know the man who stayed on that staircase with me, the man who thanked the gardener by name, the man who apologized to a waiter for a mistake that wasn't even his fault. Money didn't make him kind, Mr. Cross. He was kind long before he ever had it, and he'll still be kind long after, if it's ever taken away. That's the man I would choose, with or without a single dollar to his name." The room fell into a silence so complete that even the grandfather clock in the hallway seemed to hold its breath. Augustus turned to Julian, whose expression had shifted from careful composure into something far more vulnerable. "Julian," he said, "I promised you I would choose the woman who deserved your heart, and I have made my decision. The woman who belongs in this family is not standing among the 3 guests I invited into this house. The woman I choose is Mara Lindqvist." Priscilla's mouth fell open in disbelief. "This is absurd," she said sharply. "She's the housekeeper. She's not even one of the contestants." Bianca crossed her arms, her face flushed with anger. "You brought us here to compete against a member of your own staff?" Augustus remained calm, his voice carrying the quiet authority of a man who had built an empire from nothing and had no patience left for pretense. I brought all of you here to reveal who you truly are when you believe no one important is watching, he said. And only one of you consistently thought about my grandson's well-being instead of his wallet. Julian wheeled himself slowly toward Mara, his eyes searching her face for any sign that this had all been some elaborate performance, and finding nothing but sincerity staring back at him. Is it true, he asked quietly. Everything my grandfather just said about you? Mara knelt beside his wheelchair so they were eye to eye. And for the first time in 2 years, she allowed herself to say the words she had buried since the night he first smiled at her in the hallway and thanked her for staying late to finish the floors. I never expected any of this, Julian. She said that I came here to work, not to fall for someone I thought I could never have a future with. But if you're asking whether I care about you, the answer has been yes for longer than I've been willing to admit. Before Julian could respond, the dining room doors swung open, and Desmond Cole stormed in, his face pale with the kind of desperation that comes only from a plan collapsing in real time. I hate to interrupt this touching moment, he said, his voice sharp, but there's something everyone in this room deserves to know before congratulations are handed out. Julian's health is failing faster than any of you realize, and while he's been busy playing matchmaker games, I've been the one actually running this company. By the time the board meets tomorrow, controlling interest in cross dynamics will belong to me. What do you think happens to a family fortune when the man everyone's fighting over doesn't have long enough to spend it? Let us know in the comments what you think Desmond's next move will be, because this story still has one more twist waiting. Augustus stepped forward, his cane striking the floor with a force that silenced the room. Desmond, he said, his voice low and dangerous in a way none of the family had heard from him in years. You assumed that because I am 86 years old, I had stopped paying attention to what happens inside my own company. That was your first mistake. Mara stepped forward as well, pulling the folded piece of paper from her apron pocket, her hands trembling slightly, but her resolve unshaken. I believe this belongs to your accountants, she said, handing it to Augustus. Every account number, every date, every name Desmond mentioned when he thought no one who mattered was listening. I wrote it all down the night he tried to bribe me into helping him steal from this family. Desmond's face drained of all color. That's fabricated, he said, though his voice cracked with the first hint of real fear. No court will believe the scribbled notes of a maid. Augustus opened the paper and scanned it slowly, his expression hardening with every line. Then it's fortunate, he said, that I had my own legal team quietly auditing every overseas transaction for the past 3 months, ever since I noticed discrepancies in the quarterly reports that you assumed I was too old to catch. Desmond, the numbers you've been hiding in those shell accounts match exactly what this young woman wrote down. You didn't outsmart an old man. You underestimated a housekeeper who pays closer attention to the world than anyone in this family, including me. Security arrived within minutes, summoned by a call Augustus had placed the moment Desmond entered the room, a call he had prepared for the instant his suspicions were finally confirmed. Desmond was escorted out of the estate in handcuffs, his protests fading into the hallway as the family watched in stunned silence. Priscilla and Bianca exchanged uneasy glances before quietly excusing themselves, suddenly far less interested in staying inside a house where wealth had just proven itself no shield against consequences. Delphine, to everyone's surprise, approached Mara before leaving and extended her hand. I still think I lost fairly, she said with something resembling respect. Take care of him. He deserves someone who actually sees him. In the weeks that followed, Julian underwent surgery to repair the heart defect that had been quietly threatening his life, a risk the doctors had hesitated to recommend until his condition stabilized enough to survive the procedure. Mara never left the hospital corridor during the entire operation, refusing every offer to go home and rest, sitting instead in a stiff plastic chair with a cup of cold coffee she never finished. When Julian finally opened his eyes hours later, the first face he saw was hers, exhausted but smiling, her hand wrapped tightly around his. You stayed? He whispered that I told you I wasn't going anywhere, she answered, and for the first time in years, Julian Cross believed, without a single doubt, that someone loved him for exactly who he was. Augustus Cross stood at the back of the small garden ceremony 6 months later, watching his grandson marry a woman who had once cleaned the very halls she now walked through as a member of the family. There were no reporters, no extravagant guest lists, no headlines announcing the wedding of the century, only the people who had actually shown up for Julian and Mara when it mattered most. As the ceremony ended and the two of them shared their first dance beneath string lights strung between old oak trees, Augustus allowed himself a rare, quiet smile, the kind of smile that comes only from watching a lifetime of careful attention finally bear its truest fruit. He had spent decades building a fortune, but on that evening, watching his grandson hold the hand of a woman who had chosen him before she ever knew what he was worth, Augustus Cross understood that this, more than any boardroom victory, was the greatest inheritance he would ever leave behind. Thank you so much for watching this story all the way to the end. If it moved you even a little, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe for more stories just like it, leave a comment telling us what part stayed with you the longest, and share this with someone who needs a reminder that real love always finds a way to reveal itself.